Hi everyone and welcome to Storytime. It's Monday the 22nd of February and today's book is Roman Diary, The Journey of Iliona, a Young Slave by Richard Platt. This is a journal of me, Iliona, a new diary for my new life in Egypt, year 3 of the 221st Olympiad. My thoughts run faster than my pen as I write. This for today, I learnt that our lives are about to change. We have to sail to Egypt on a galley that leaves the day after tomorrow. We must make this sudden journey because my father has learnt that a warehouse he owns in Egypt is burnt to the ground. He must travel there immediately to see it rebuilt. Mother, my brother, Apollo, and I will all travel with him and make our home in Alexandria for 2 years at least. It is a thrilling and wonderful idea, for I've never left our Greek island before. We'll have a fine big house here on Mithrae, but in Egypt we'll have an even bigger one. Everything else will be different too. This, in truth, is why I've begun a diary, so that I might write down what we do each day to record everything new while it's still fresh. To help with this project, my mother has given me a writing set, a bundle of fine goose quills tied with purple ribbon, a knife to sharpen them, a travelling ink pot, and a roll of the finest papyrus I have ever seen. Its surface is as smooth as the skin on Apollo's back. In just 2 days we shall board our ship in the harbour here and set sail from Mytilene, that's better, I pronounced it right this time, across the warm Aegean Sea. I think I should like to stand at the front, let down my hair and feel the salt wind comb and curl it. In a little more than a week we shall be in Alexandria. I cannot wait for this adventure to begin. The first day of our voyage. This morning before dawn we came aboard our ship. As the sun rose, the crew put on their oars and began to beat a splashing tune on the water. From land, I have often watched boats leaving the harbour. They seem to glide gracefully over the blue sea. From the deck, the view is different. 100 men or more must strain every muscle to push the boat forward. This morning, though, the crew did not labour for long. The wind blew from the land, and once the sail was raised, they could rest. I stood at the front of the ship with Apollo to let the wind comb my hair, as I had dreamed. Instead, it teased it into a knotted mass, which took an hour to untangle. The 5th day. Pity us! Apollo and I have lost everything we loved and cherished. We're now orphans and slaves to be bought and sold like goats. We were but a half day from Rhodes when a sail appeared behind us. From the shape of the ship and the way it cut through the water, the crew could tell that it was a pirate craft. Our mariners rushed to their oars. Though they strained and pulled, the dark outline grew ever bigger behind us. In the battle that followed, my mother drowned, and my father was run through with a pirate sword. My tears flowed, but I could do nothing. The pirates were not interested in the ship's cargo of wine, only in taking slaves, which they called self-loading cargo. They took from Apollo and me all we possessed except my ink pens and papyrus. These they let me keep because they guessed I will fetch a better price if it's obvious I know what my letters are. Our journey to Egypt is at an end. Now we have begun another journey to the very centre of the world, Rome. My 3rd day in Rome. We reached this strange and enormous city 2 days ago. Not directly, but hopping like frogs, for we were bought and sold 3 times on the way. At each auction, Apollo and I clung to each other in case we should be sold apart. But, praise be to Zeus, it hasn't happened. And other children have joined our miserable band. And at each auction our price rises, though mine's more than Apollo's, for I can speak fluent Latin and read a few words, but he struggles to even write in Greek. Finally, we came to the port of Ostia on a stinking barge, which I think must have carried rotten fish before it carried us. We were herded quickly through the streets to some dark, cramped lodgings. We had food to eat, bread, oil, and olives, but we were all filthy from our long journey. Creatures moved in my hair, my clothes were like rags, and my eyes were red from crying. Today 2 women came to the room in which we were locked with the other children. They took us out and gave us water and oil to wash. They cleaned our hair with fine tooth combs to remove the lice and gave us new garments to wear. I couldn't help but enjoy this, until one of my companions snapped, "Idiot, can't you see they're preparing us for sail again?" My 4th day. The women returned this morning. They hung wooden signs around each of our necks. I was quite pleased that I could read the Latin on mine. It said Greek maiden. They also dusted our feet with chalk. I learned this was to show that we were newly taken as slaves, and so likely to be a troublesome buy. "Greeks for sale," the traders shouted. "Greeks for sale." as they pushed Apollo and I onto a little platform so that everyone in the crowd could see us clearly. When the bidding began, it was brisk, and we were sold to a tall man who bought no other slaves in the sale. As he pressed through the crowds towards us, I was relieved that Apollo and I had been bought as a single lot, but anxious about what would become of us. I asked the man where we were going. He cocked his head to one side, raised his eyebrows as if he couldn't have been more surprised to hear a dog speak Latin. "You're the property of Gaius Martius," he replied. "He's a senator, and I'm his overseer. You work at his domus here in Rome." He turned Apollo's right hand over to look at the palm. "Judging by the smoothness of these hands, your brother's never done a stroke of work, but it'd be useful on my master's farm in the hills." Then he pushed us forward into the square. "Come on, shake that chalk off your feet." The 6th day. My parting from Apollo came sooner than I had dreamed possible. Foreseeing me sob all the way to the auction, the overseer clearly decided he'd have no peace until we were separated. When we reached the house, he pushed me into a little room close to the door, and closed the door and bolted it. I hammered with my fists, but simply got them bruised and splintered. I lay on the bed and tried to forget I was a prisoner by writing everything that had happened that morning in this journal. I must have slept afterwards, for when I awoke, the door was open and a little lamp burned in an alcove in the wall, casting shadows across the room. When one of them moved, I sat up quickly. "Don't be afraid," the shadow said, and I saw its owner, a girl of a couple of years older than me. She told me she was a slave too, and that would be happy here, for the master was a kind and generous man, and his wife doesn't whip us unless we deserve it, she added. I asked her name, but before answering, she leaned out the door and bellowed, "She's awake!" She had just told me she was called Cytheris when a tall, finely dressed woman swept into the room and shooed her out. "Iliona, that's your name, isn't it?" the woman asked me, turning to me. I want you to know how welcome you are," she said, but she didn't smile. I asked if I could see Apollo. She looked puzzled, then left the room. A moment later, my little brother shuffled in. I jumped up and threw my arms round his neck. We sat for a moment on the bed together, but before we had time to say much, the woman came back. In her arms was a sleeping child, about a year old. The overseer followed her in, so I guessed what was to come. I screamed and begged him not to take Apollo, but it made no difference. He pushed us roughly apart. Seeing my tears, the woman sat down and put her arm round my shoulder. This started me sobbing again, and the child awoke. I thought that she would cry too, but instead she grabbed my hand and began sucking on my little finger. More gently this time, her mother, my new mistress, began talking to me. I was about to complain and teach her, I was about to be a companion, and teacher for little Lydia, she said. I would also teach Greek to Lydia's half-brothers, Marcus and Lucullus. We wanted to buy you because you already knew some Latin, she explained. Her arm around my shoulder, the warmth of the room, and the child in her arms, all these things reminded me of home and my own mother. Not in a sad way, but, to my surprise, in a way that comforted me. And for a moment I forgot my sorrow, and I began to wonder if I might actually be happy here. Day 111 of the month of Maius, year 890. I'd imagined what a slave's life here in Rome would be one of locks and chains, but there was nothing to keep me from running away. Yet to where I would run and why I would try, I'm beginning to see that in Rome, slavery and freedom are not opposites like day and night or winter and summer. The poorest Roman citizens are worse off than many slaves. Here I've got clothes, though it's true they are simple linen. My stomach never aches with hunger, though the food is plain, and I can rest when I'm tired. I sleep in a room with Cytheris, and in this I feel I am lucky. Cytheris keeps me company and is teaching me much about Rome. Last night I learned about the calendar. Romans count the years from the date Rome itself was founded. The months are about 30 days long, and each differently named. The days are more difficult. And for now, I will just make my diary by counting up from the first day of each month. Day 4. This day I began my studies. It was the first time I had set foot outside since the auction. I'd expected to study at home, as girls always do in Greece, but instead I went to school with Marcus and Lucullus. The three of us walked there, through the streets with Cestius, the boys' pedagogus. There you go. I was surprised at how humble the school is. On Mytilene, Apollo studied in a grand building with 100 other boys. This was just a tiny room with a few stools and an armchair for the teacher. Cestius made fun of my surprise. This is one of the better ones, he told me. Most boys sit in the street to study. Our class was not so different from my brother's school in Mytilene. Mostly we write on the same wax-coated tablets, though my stylus is shaped like the letter T. With its flat end, I can flatten the wax when I make my mistakes, which I think is a fine idea, for I make many of them. We studied reading and writing from morning until noon, when Cestius came back. We walked home along Etruscan Street, which is lined with the most exotic kinds of shops. In fact, my nose found the street before my eyes, because all the incense and perfume sellers all had their stalls there. The street is very busy, and Cestius took my hand. Keep your eyes peeled, he told us. There are thieves around every corner. They'll skin you alive and sell you back your own hide before you can realise that you've even been robbed. We saw no thieves, but we did have to flatten ourselves against the wall as a huge cart rumbled past, carrying building stone and timber. Our limbs seemed to be more at risk than our purses. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.